Um, I'm Christie Provenzano. As you can see here on my introductory slide, you can see that I have no university affiliated with my name because I went through my resignation ceremony on March 31st, and I am currently unemployed, quite happily. Thank you very much. But I am recently of Chikushi Jogakuin University, and we had the Buddhist prayer and everything and chanting, and I said bye-bye. So I am leaving Japan after 30 some years, it's 32 maybe. And so I have a long history of with all of you, so many of you, so many familiar faces, and thank you for coming. It's kind of a one more farewell party. I can add on to my farewell kilos, but anyway, today I'd like to talk about things that when it comes to multilingual child raising, things that worked in the past, things that didn't work in the past, the situation in the past, and how that might have changed right now. I scrambled to interview some families who are in the throes of it right now, so I have a few case study anecdotes to share with you, which is quite useful. It was interesting for me, for sure. Some of the resources that are available now that just weren't available way back when. So let's see what we're going to look at today. All right, so we're just going to briefly cover a couple of terms. So I know that you're familiar with these terms, but just to make sure that what you understand those terms to be and what I understand them to be are the same. I'd like to look at some issues, generally for multilingual child raising in the Japanese context. I want to look at some basic principles for supporting minority language development in this, kind of monolingual, but increasingly less so, but monolingual environment that we have here in Japan. A few things to avoid if you are in the process of raising your children to be multilingual. And then I would like to open things up and share experiences with, people who've been there, done that, or who are in the process of doing so, and we'll see how we do. And that should be an hour. Is there any way to
sorry, I'm find with the
okay. All right, well, I'm just going to carry on. So about terms, of course, we've got multilingual and multiliterate. For a long time, I have been a member of the bilingualism SIG, and there's actually within the SIG over the years, there's been some talk about we're calling it bilingualism, but really it's multilingualism because there's a lot of families who are not just doing Japanese and English. Maybe we've got Japanese and some other language, or maybe within the home, one of the two of the case study families I talked to before coming here today have two parents from different cultures. So there's in fact 3 languages going on. So yeah, I think multilingualism is a better term for what we're talking about, even if there are only 2 languages happening in a family. So multilingual kind of is a great umbrella term that covers basically people who can communicate in 2 languages. Nice general term. But a lot of times people assume that, he's multilingual. It means that he can, listen and speak, but also read and write, which is not necessarily the case. So I think, talking about biliteracy is also important, and that, or multiliteracy. So to be multiliterate means actually you have real skills in reading and writing and communication in English. So, and finally, I toss around the term CCK sometimes, cross-culture kid. Some years ago, I felt that our family sort of qualified as a TCK family, a third culture kid family. Are you guys familiar with this term? All right, so it's when children are growing up in a culture that is not their passport culture, they are often called third culture kids because they have sort of one foot in their passport culture and one foot in the host culture, but they themselves, as a bridge between cultures are, occupy this third culture. But TCK is, I think, it has become kind of a limited, narrow, expression because, you know, back when it was first written about the original Van Recken, and even before that, the sociologists Usim et al. They were talking about families who were, you know, the children of diplomats, you know, and the children of missionaries who would frequently change locations. So they talked about, you know, the loss, et cetera, of culture as they skipped over to a new culture. But I think CCK, this is a, you know, a revision of the Third Culture Kid book. It's better term, I think, especially for talking about, like, if you guys have kids. So maybe you have, like my family, you have, you know, two non-Japanese parents raising their children in Japan, right? It's because CCK is basically a kid who has experience of two languages, two cultures before the age of 18. So it's a nice big umbrella that includes international families, you know, families like some of my case study families who, you know, mom from this country, dad from that country, raising children in Japan. A lot of people here have a Japanese spouse. So, you know, those sorts of families where, you know, there's Japanese culture in the home, but also another culture in the home. So yeah, cross-culture kid pops up every now and then. Everybody's okay with those? Yep. All right. And so in the Japanese context, we're talking about how to foster multilingualism in our children. So fortunately, you know, as we know in the majority language context, you know, we don't have to work so hard for our kids to become you know, proficient in the host culture's language, right? For families like mine, sometimes it can be a little harder because we don't have, you know, my husband and I both being English-speaking Canadians, we had English at home. So when the kids were really little, they, you know, had to look for more opportunities, or I had to look for more opportunities for them to interact in Japanese, to develop native level Japanese. So that could be a little bit more of a challenge. For those of you who have, you know, have one Japanese parent, one non-Japanese parent, it's a little easier because the Japanese is there in the home as well. But, you know, in this Japanese context, of course, we don't have to work so hard even to, you know, to give them lots of opportunities to use that language. And once they go off to school, well, you know, the system here is pretty great at helping the kids develop literacy, right? And because we know learning Japanese is really tough and takes a lot of time, and that rote practice, you know, is best conducted by schools, in my experience, right? I've heard from, over the years, from some Japanese families who go to another country where it's much harder for them to recreate a Japanese bubble for themselves in a different culture, because Japanese does require so much time to develop, especially literacy. So in that respect, we were pretty lucky to have our little English bubble here. And then, you know, society, school, the community helped us, you know, develop their Japanese easily. Now, one of the case study families I talked to, one of the ones that has dad from country A, mom from country B, and then the child was born here and is being raised here. This child is now, I think, grade 3, and although she's, you know, doing really well, going to school, having no problems, you know, with oral communication, as maybe some other parents have experienced, she was having some trouble in Japanese. So back in the day, you know, my youngest is now 23, and she also had similar problems. She could read the hiragana, she could read the katakana, she was okay with the kanji and stuff, but, you know, deeper reading comprehension and, you know, getting sort of cultural references and things like this were a little difficult for her. And in those days, we just had to suck it up and, you know, deal with it. But I was quite happy to hear that now, for this family, there are resources available for non-Japanese students who are entering the school system in Fukuoka City. I think other cities have had similar programs for longer. For example, up in the Kanto area, there's a lot of immigrants from Brazil, so there's a lot of support for Japanese as a second language for families of Brazilian immigrants. But here, at least anywhere I looked, there wasn't that kind of support here. But yeah, this mom told me now the Fukuoka City Board of Education, I found this guidebook online. The guidebook is in English, very nice, dated 2019. So how recent is it? I don't know. I couldn't find a more recent version of this guidebook, but I did find updated information on the Fukuoka City Board of Education website, which was very nice, except it was all in Japanese. So not exactly useful for people who, were just coming to the system and wondering how to get along. But the thing that this mother pointed out to me was this, and sorry, this is a screenshot. I know, Steve, I know this is too much text on my slide, sorry, but Japanese language support for children project. So what happens is a Japanese language support coordinator, when you appeal to your homeroom teacher or your the vice principal or the principal, they will say, okay, we're going to get the language coordinator to come in, assess the child, work with the child, and in this family's case, the teacher, a dedicated teacher, came to the school twice a week, I think, and the child was pulled out of class to get extra help with the stuff she was having trouble with. It wasn't a standard program. The teacher assessed the child, said, oh, this is what she needs, and was able to target her weak point. So that was very useful. And now this year, she's going to a hub school where, and that is once a week at the convenience of the parent's schedule. And they take her there where they have teachers stationed. And yeah, again, they're working on this individualized program for her. So I think that's pretty great support for anybody whose child is actually struggling in Japanese. But generally, when I'm talking about this topic, families are like, yeah, Japanese. Okay, we got that sorted. But how about the other languages? How about the minority language? So let's carry on here and see what else we've got. So we can see that the Japanese education generally ensures Japanese literacy and support for students struggling with Japanese is happening. But what is still a problem, even after all this time, is monolingual assumptions in school and society persist, that monolingualism is natural and normal. And why do you want to confuse your kid by trying to teach them another language? And you really should just do Japanese first and put that off till later. This is still going on. This is still a general attitude, even though there are more and more non-Japanese kids and international families with children entering the school system. And continues to be limited institutional societal support for minority language education. It's basically assimilation. We'll support you to do Japanese. We want to get you into the Japanese system and doing Japanese as fast as possible. We don't really care if your kid also should learn French or English or Swahili or whatever it is. So these are problems. Of course, we know, for most of us, we're teaching English and we're interested in English. And so for English as a minority language, we know that they do have English instruction at school. But, for native speaker children, this is the pen is not going to cut it, right? We need them to get far beyond there. And if you really want your child to be on a similar level to their same age peers in your home country, you're going to have to work harder for it. And what it really takes is a lot of parental involvement. I mean, you can pay somebody to do it. You can ship them off to, their eikaiwa gakkos or hire tutors and things like this. But it's going to cost a lot of money. And, a lot of people just really can't do that. So here are some ideas for how to do it. And I'm sure that many of you already, you'll recognize these things and already have done them. One obvious thing is to speak the minority language at home. In my family's case, having the English bubble at home was very easy. It took no effort whatsoever, but a lot of families have a Japanese spouse and a non-Japanese spouse. And so there you get a lot of input in the majority language. So it becomes really unweighted. We as language educators know that it takes exposure, lots and lots and lots of input to develop language. And if the amount of input is halved, or more than halved, because the non-Japanese parent has great Japanese, then, and so, the home language is Japanese, that's going to be really hard for that child to learn the minority language. So I have to say, there were times that I was running a learning circle to develop literacy and bilingualism for kids, and mostly for my kids, but also for other kids, because making the group was a much more supportive environment for them. And so I would get calls, typically, sorry guys, but typically from dads, Western dads saying, hey, I heard you doing a learning circle. Can you teach my kid English? And I'm like, nope, that's not what I'm doing here. What I'm doing here is, providing an opportunity to continue and practice what you are doing at home with your kid, or what your kid is doing, maybe somewhere else. But I am not the only and all, teacher. This is an opportunity to have a community and a place to practice. But I'm not teaching your kids. So, if you're not doing anything at home, I can't help you. Yeah, basically. And there were a lot of people who were not doing something at home, and then had, 8, 9, 10-year-old kid going, holy cow, I can't talk to my kid in English, right? And it's like, yeah. So, and well, one guy, I remember, he contacts me, yeah, so I really like my child to come. And I said, okay, so the kids in my learning circle who are the same age as your child, were doing like early phonics and, reading simple text, where is your child at for literacy? And he's like, well, he knows the ABC song. And like, okay, yeah, go away and work with him for a while, and maybe call me next year when you've got him up to, something. And I never heard from that guy again. So anyway, so speaking the language at home all the time, as much as possible. Ask the Japanese spouse also to speak English sometimes, because there are some times when kids, they feed off of their parents' likes and dislikes. And I've seen families where one of the parents is, not really comfortable in English, and although they had some ability in speaking English, they hesitated to do so and always said how hard it was. And I was like, and that child in that family resisted learning English because of the attitudes coming off the Japanese parent. Similar family situation, that Japanese parent was, had not perfect English, but she spoke English as often as possible. And when the kids got older and they're like, Mom, you didn't say that right. She's like, okay, well, teach me. How do I say it right? And to, make this environment where it's normal in our house to use two languages. It's cool to use two languages. That's really important. The Japanese spouse still has a role, in making that happen. So, so that's one thing you can do. Speak the minority language at home with everybody all the time, as much as possible, and make it just normal that this happens in our house. Reading aloud, there's a ton of research for native speaker kids in Japanese and in English, just generally. I mean, your kids who went through the Japanese system, did they do ondoku? They come home, they got to read their books, right? They read aloud. It's just this fluency activity that, just gives them this practice. So reading aloud for the child, but also long before they're literate, for you to read aloud to them. We, lots of research in early childhood education saying this is the way to help a child develop language. So you read a lot, as much as possible, every night, all the time. You don't have to limit it to bedtime stories when they're little. I have an anecdote here that probably some of you have heard before, but I'm going to tell it again because I just love it. I have two daughters. The elder girl, turns out, had a kind of aptitude for reading. I didn't realize that at first. I thought I was just a great teacher. And, so yeah, I know how to do this. And then the next one comes along, and she is a reluctant reader. She doesn't like reading. She said to me one day, reading's not my, she's like, I'm bored. I'm like, well, go read a book or something. She's like, no, that's my sister's thing. That's not my thing. Oh my God, she needs to, I want her to see herself as a reader. And how are we going to do this? So we came up with this idea, my husband and I, of doing family reading time. And so the rules for this family reading time that started that day at 8 p.m., everybody gathered in one room, in the living room, and everybody had to bring a book. Dad could not read a newspaper or magazine. Mom could not look at a computer. Everybody had to have a book, and we would get together and read. And if somebody had a question, had a word they didn't know, or what does this mean, or I can't decipher, what does WHERE spell, without any judgment or pressure, you could just pipe up and say, hey, what does WHERE spell? And somebody would answer, oh, that's where, and they would carry on. And so the non-reader, she like gets her through her 1 page or 2 pages of Magic Tree House, I think it was at that time, and that's in 30 minutes. And then, fast forward a few weeks, and she's getting through a chapter, 2 chapters, and I was, this is working. And then, she's zooming through the books now. And finally, I remember one day the house was quiet, and I'm just like, hey, where are you? And she says, I'm in my room. I'm like, what are you doing? Reading. And I'm like, damn it. Yeah.
How often was this? Every week?
Every night.
Every night.
Every night. 8 o'clock. Yep. Yep. Mm-hmm. So we just made it a priority because I felt like this is important, and I need to change it quick.
How long did that take?
A couple of years. I mean, the every night thing kind of got, but what happened was, and this is like moving on from read your own book thing, we started to enjoy reading to each other, right? And there were books that I really wanted to share with the kids that I thought, they can't read this yet, it's too hard, but it's a great story, so hey, let's read this one together. So we read The Hobbit together. And, and we talked about, and to share the story together and use our imagination. And I did a really bad English accents and stuff, which, I won't even try to demonstrate. Yeah. So not at all. I will not, no. It was a long time ago. But, we shared this story together, and it was wonderful. And we did like To Kill a Mockingbird, and there were issues in there that we could stop. And I say, hey, like, why do you think, what do you think about the way people were treating Boo, and how about this and that? So it was a really great time. And sometimes on weekends they'd be like, hey, can we read that book? And we would sit down, and sometimes I'd be like, oh, I'm so tired. Will you please read? Because I just, so it was a really good time. Family reading time. And English is great. Of course, Japanese, anything to get them reading. It's, everybody knows this is a good thing for kids, and for their cognitive development, their language development, for their personal feelings of self-worth, everything. It's a really great skill. So moving on from reading aloud, I could talk about that a lot, but just reading in general is a great way to support minority language acquisition, but to create a culture of reading in your home is important. Interest-based language engagement, basically doing stuff that they like to do in English And when I was talking with one of my case study families, she said this, and I was like, can I say that please in my presentation? She said, if you're learning how to sew in English, it's going to help your English and you're going to learn how to sew. And I'm like, yes, yes, so do stuff in English. And kind of adding on to this, the other family where the two parents are from different countries. So the mom is so one of their languages is English and the other of their languages is Russian. And the mom is kind of the only source of Russian for this child. And so she's like, I don't want to be I'm busy. I don't want to be the only source. So she is now like bringing it into 2025 and their child is on on Zoom lessons with Russian tutors. And it's not just about learning Russian. It's about, they're doing math in Russian and they're doing there's some critical thinking something. They do puzzles and she's with other Russian children on the call. And so this mom has really, looked for opportunities to increase the exposure to Russian in addition to speaking Russian in the home. And this is part of it. Okay, yeah, you can, in that family, there's no screen time unless during the week, unless it's educational. Like if she's going to be on the screen doing one of these Zoom calls with a Russian tutor, then fine, you can use the computer. But other than that, there's no screen time. And so there's actually no problem finding extra time to do, English reading or play a game in English, a board game in English and that sort of thing, because they've just taking the, time gobbling screen time aspect out of it. So a lot of stuff packed in there. But internet-based language, interest-based language engagement is really key. I mean, I think we instinctively know that as parents and as educators too. We want our students to take part in things that are fun and just so happen to also provide an opportunity to, use the target language. Some of these ideas could be, of course, craft. You want to learn how to sew, maybe mom doesn't know how to sew, so let's look it up on YouTube and it's English instruction about how to sew, and yay, I get to make a pillow and learn, do all that in English. So they're, as we know, they're learning it without even knowing that they're learning it. Board games in particular, I know there's been a resurgence culturally in North America at least of board game nights. Our family really got into board games, and a lot of them have, cards and things that have to be read. Maybe some of the games you play, you have to write a sentence and put it in the box or something. So it uses a lot of language. And also it gives you family time, right? Where the screens are off, we're sitting around together, we're having conversations over top of the board games. And so this is all language development. And if you can make that happen in the minority language, that will support the child's development and give them a sort of positive attitude about it. Because as some of you may know, sometimes children resist. It's like, why do I have to use this language? None of my friends know that language. Like, what do I need it for? You can't make me. Right? And I think there's a lot of that kind of resistance going on. So games are great. Letters. This was old school. So she had a pen pal friend up in Wakayama, and they had a notebook that they would send back and forth. So one would write something and send it away, and then that one would receive it and read and then respond. And so this went back and forth for several years. We still have, I think we have 3 of the notebooks that they filled up. But again, this was not focused on how to write English. This was focusing on communicating with my friend, right, in Wakayama. So it was super motivating. And these days, you don't even have to go to the post office, right? So you can use all sorts of messaging apps and, whatever you feel like doing to help your kids communicate with cousins overseas or friends in other parts of Japan or somebody from summer camp last year or whatever. And if they're communicating in writing in the target language, so much better. Yeah, so old version, new version on the internet. How are we doing for time? Okay, yeah. Let's see now. So those are just a few ways that you can support your child. Of course, what I haven't talked about is sending them off to Saturday school, learning circles, Kumon, which a lot of people like to do because it's there, it's easy, and in many ways it's effective. So, I mean, but everybody kind of makes their own plan and, according to their budget, the amount of time they have and what their children's interests are. What doesn't work so well, and this is something that maybe is important for people who are in the throes of the multilingual child raising at the moment, is passive input. I've talked to a lot of parents who said, well, I thought, yeah, we watch, Sesame Street in English, or we watch these things in English, we do the English videos, and that's good. That's like the extra input, but the interaction, face-to-face interaction with people, I mean, psychologists who study babies' brains, they know this is what works, right? This is what brings real understanding and, shows the child what real communication is about. It's not just watching and receiving, right? So passive input only is no good. It's not to say passive input at all is bad, but you have to do this plus all the other stuff. Language study without emotional connection. We know this as language educators, we know this. If the student, it's just like, oh, here's a worksheet. And it's like, okay, I'm done. Can I go play now? Right? So it's not engaging. It's not motivating. It doesn't stick, right? So don't just sit your kid down with a workbook and say, we have to do this, right? You have to make it engaging and interesting for them. And also it helps if they can see a why, right? Well, if you learn more of this, this book that you enjoyed, when mom reads it to you, well, you can, if I'm busy, you can read it by yourself, so that's hopefully, to engage them with a real purpose for what they're doing. Relying on schools and weekend programs alone, a lot of busy parents are just like, I got no time, that, I can't make time for this, so I'm going to ship them off to, what is it, English Chatterbox or Kumon, or I'm just going to, well, they'll get enough of it in the school system. And yeah, it's true that, what they get at school can be helpful. I'm not saying it's completely useless for native speaker kids. My reluctant reader was also a terrible speller. The first time she wrote the exchange notebook, every single word was misspelled. I was like, I don't know what to do with that, right? And so I tried to do spelling activities, and it was just not happening. And so finally, I kind of gave up. And then at junior high school, they do the kind of kanji style drill, and you write because, right? Nothing. You have to write the word again and again and again. And although I think it's just tediously, like mind-numbingly boring, she learned how to spell. So yay.
She might have had dyslexia.
I wonder, yeah. I mean, now she does okay. Yeah, but it was just a while she couldn't, like.
What if you give her a word she doesn't spell?
Now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying, if you go the Japanese route of memorizing everything.
Right.
And if you hear a word you don't know, it's good.
That's true. Yeah. I don't know. I wonder. Yeah. Now I've got to call her and say, hey, spell it.
I spent 2 years tutoring my son. I know everything about English spelling. Really bad.
Okay.
So there's rules that you can learn, but some kids have really worse dyslexia.
Right. Well, actually, in just a few more minutes, we'd like to hear more about that. Yeah. But yes, there is a role for what they're doing in school. Another kind of benefit of doing the homeschooling in English is, when English at school is easy, they can like spend more time on other stuff. Their friends in in elementary school now, because grade 5, grade 6, they're starting English education. You know, their friends are like, oh, wow, I got to learn this stuff. And your kid is like, oh, that's easy. So they can spend more time doing the math or doing the social studies. So it's kind of a bonus and an easy A, you know, for them, which is, you know, kind of nice. Yeah. Now, like as I said, in this last what do we have, 20 minutes, I think there's a lot of experience in this room. I'd like to talk about your own experiences. So first of all, how many members here are actively, you have kids, young kids that they're raising? Yes. Okay. All right. And how many have been there, done that, and kids are out into society now? Yeah. See, this is what we need. We need some of the latter to get together with some of the former and share it, right? So I'd like to know, for those of you whose kids are gone already or out into the world, what have you, and also for people who are in the throes of things, what have you tried, right? And what has and hasn't worked in that regard. So yeah, we tried this and so for example, what has and hasn't worked. One family, Japanese dad, South African mom, they tried to do English time and Japanese time. So everybody would, you know, from I don't know if it was days or at lunchtime or something, but they tried to have English time and Japanese time, and the kid wasn't having any of it. It's like, no, I'm not going to randomly, you know, change my language. So that just didn't work. But what does work for them is, you know, when you're with this parent, it's kind of one parent, one language. When you're with this parent, you're going to speak English, and when you're with that parent, or when we're doing this activity, we're going to speak this language because it makes sense. You know, that we will play this English game using English. And it makes sense that we're going to, you know, use Japanese when we're making this Japanese recipe for nikujaga or something like that. So that was that family. New tools and resources. The parent who is, you know, exposing or giving her child a lot of input in Russian, she's just, you know, she has found every program possible to, you know, and just is not looking for just Russian, but she had a speech therapist who, you know, it was not only helping the daughter with pronunciation, but also learning Russian. So I thought that was a pretty clever way of going about it. But I think she's got like 3 different activities going online in Russian, so that mom is not the only input source for Russian. And what have you tried? And also for the parents whose kids are away and gone, where are they now? How did it work out? Did they become bilingual? Are they using their languages? And you know, how does that all look in the future? Like for all the people who are still in the middle of it, is it worth it? What's going on? I can tell you an answer to that. So for our 2, they are both in Canada now, and they do not actively use their Japanese day to day, except this one has a roommate who is an international Japanese guy, and so they speak champon all the time, and it's so comfortable for her to just code switch, you know, at home, and they really support each other in that. That's very nice. But they both say that their sort of international upbringing and their knowledge of other languages has made it easier to learn further, you know, aspects. Like this one went to Costa Rica to finish high school and started learning Spanish, and it was just like, it was a faster thing. She didn't perfectly learn Spanish, I must say, but but she was able to get through the Spanish courses and everything with a relative facility, because, you know, once you have knowledge of a couple languages, it's easier to acquire the next to the next. Yeah, so she is in grad school. She's just graduating with her undergraduate, and they're launching off into society. So I think we did all right, yeah, in that regard. But let's go back to these questions and make a few groups. Everybody should come to the after party social so we can carry on, because I want to hear what was being talked about in the other groups. But one thing I'd like to just report that I heard from various groups, in two of the different groups, we have parents whose native language is not English, and they're talking about the difficulty of communicating, or fostering any sort of development in that language with their kids, and also balancing a super busy schedule. And yeah, sometimes you just have to say, well, it's not going to happen, and you have to be okay with it. And what you said was really impacted me. It's just like, I don't feel guilty, I couldn't do it, I'm busy, and he's got great Japanese, so, and have to be okay with that, right? So yeah, good for you. A lot of new parents or in the throes of things here, and like, where do we go? What do we do? What's the best thing? And I think that what I'd like to summarize there is just that, you're going to figure out what works best in your family, right? And what you might not even know what that is right now, what it looks like, but you're going to come upon it and say, oh, well, this works really well for my kid. This suits my family. This suits our schedule, whatever. And you just have to, I think that just by being here and talking with other parents about it, you're on the right track. Yeah. And for all, I wanted to listen to what everybody's doing, but I learned something new about dyslexia, which I'm just like, I'm really going to go back and talk with my formerly reluctant reader about her experience. And I wonder, yeah. Anyway, so with that, I'm going to wrap it up and say thank you so much for coming and for sharing your stories, because this is really, I think, how it happens. And maybe out of this community, you make yourself a learning circle, and or you make a play group, and the kids have a chance to play in the minority language or whatever it is. I mean, if you can find a bunch of Finnish speakers, and to get together and play, and so it can be something that can become input for the kids. And in addition to that, making a community that supports them and makes them feel not quite so different. And it'd be wonderful. But thank you all. Thank you, JALT, for inviting me. Thank you, JALT, for many years of camaraderie and friendship. So I will miss you all. All right. And Chris, now you have to tell me how am I gonna get my pension?